or denying climate change, he would have his bot go and pick out bits of research and like email them back and try and set them straight. So you could apply that to religion, politics, or anything you like to argue on your behalf because you've got other things to do, right? It's a time-saving device. Another gentleman, and this is well worth taking a look at, was Project Real Boy by a chap called Greg Mara. And he was kind of one of the first to actually start looking at social bots and creating social bots on Twitter that behaved kind of more like humans, really. So well worth checking out. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because we'll be short on time. Then politics. So I always mispronounce Roelof's second name, but Roelof Taminghi from Perturba fame, the guys that wrote Maltego. Roelof and Kenneth Geers wrote a paper in 2009 called Virtual Plots, Real Revolutions. And he discusses the concept here of what if both left and right-wing blogs were seeded with false but credible information about one of the candidates. Well, a year later, on Twitter, we saw, there was a vote between Martha Coakley and Scott Brown, but shortly before that vote, there was a lot of misinformation or dragging Martha's name through the mud on Twitter, and that escalated pretty quickly, so that it was kind of an overwhelming amount of negative information about Martha Coakley. And the result, although it may not be related to what happened on Twitter, was that Scott Brown won. There was certainly a lot of discussion on the use of Twitter to sort of slate Martha Coakley, and that got a name, or has been also attributed to a name, and the name for that is Swift boating. That actually went a little bit better in practice, but as does everything I do. But that gained its name not from Taylor Swift, but from the US military veterans, where you've got this sort of thing where you question somebody's military record, and that apparently has some effect on how popular they're going to be in certain states. So the other thing we've been seeing is that a bunch of Russian students or bloggers or what have you were paid some money to write positive blogs about President Putin in the run-up to his election. It's not a brilliant example of this, but it is an example. And that's got a term, it's called astroturfing, and that's essentially a fake grassroots campaign to make somebody look popular and to build support for a message, a political agenda, any sort of agenda, essentially. There's a group at the Indiana University who've been working on a project called Truthy, which aims to detect sort of political and other sorts of astroturfing and the generation of memes and sort of activity like that online. And that's worth having a look. They've got some neat videos. You can put in a meme or something like that and look at where it originated from. So they're actually doing some really good work because they feel that what's out there on social media has got a real impact in the real world, and they need to pay some attention to this space. So really interesting. Then we've got sock puppets. It was HB Gary's email hack, when was that, 2010, 11 or something like that, kind of switched me onto the term of sock puppets, and it mentioned that US spy operations or military operations were looking for sort of fake persona management, and there was some discussion about whether that had been used in like the Arab Spring context to help nudge a certain group into a certain direction. The interesting thing about that particular concept is that this was cited in Roelof and Kenneth Geers' 2009 paper as well. It states, a large virtual population scattered all over the world and encompassing different socio-economic backgrounds could be programmed to support any personal, business, political, military or terrorist agenda. So there's some incentive there. Next, at Christmas this year, there's a mobile phone provider in the UK that was sending out tweets like this to users who were having problems. Please follow us and DM your mobile number, postcode, and password. Thanks. That was the legitimate account. that got picked up by a gentleman in Australia called Troy Hunt, who some of you may follow on Twitter or maybe read his blogs, but some excellent blogs. And he was tweeting them and got one tweet back from this account, My EE Care, which looks a lot like EE, but isn't. It's subtly different. So he's looking, then Troy Hunt responded to this tweet. I'm not saying Troy Hunt's susceptible, because I responded to that tweet too. Saying something like, well, it's nice to see you sort of taking an engaging approach to tackling the problem, to which the My EE Care folks said, no, we don't really care, actually. But the point is that if you can get your bot to work on behalf of a brand and get in there before your brand, a number of users aren't actually going to check whether it's a legitimate one or the non-legitimate one. Then after our Black Hat talk on Wednesday, a gentleman came up to us and started asking questions about the possibility of misdirecting emergency resources during some sort of unrest. And that made me think, oh yeah, actually there's a chap at Manchester University, Professor Proctor, I want to say, I might be wrong about that. I'll add that to the speaker notes. But he was looking at fake information in relation to the London riots, and what they'd observed, they were observing rumours. And the rumours were like there's lots of carnage and there's shops on fire, don't go into this high street. And that was perpetuating around Twitter at the time. And yet that high street had almost nobody on it, and there was certainly not a riot and no stores were on fire. So they were looking at how long it takes for a rumour to perpetuate and the truth catch up. And his statement, which made me chuckle, but I'm sure it's not new, is like a rumour gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put his pants on. So that's another way you could sort of use it. I mentioned Tim Hwang. He set up an organization called Pacific Social, because part of that, the experiment, the social bots experiment, was really looking at, okay, you've got the group of 500. After that, it sort of morphed majorly the social graph. So he was like, oh, can you distort a social graph? Maybe stitch two disparate communities together. So that was kind of his position on that topic, and wanted to sort of research it a little bit more. The other thing he was interested in is something called emotional contagion and happiness buffering. So you take a group of people who are happy. When their happiness levels drop below a certain threshold, then you start injecting happy tweets into the network and using sentiment analysis, and turn the sad people happy again. So that's one of the things they're looking at. I'm not sure how far they've got to. And he also mentioned this concept of sort of social penetration testing. So spread information with small inaccuracies, see where they're challenged and where they're not challenged, identify who's the most influential, but also the worst at evaluating what's real, and target them. Then this chap here, Yazan Boschmaff at the University of British Columbia, has studied bots in quite some depth in relation to Facebook. And he had this social bot steal 250 gigabytes of user data, which ties back nicely to the Airhead graph paper from MIT. So Boschmaff was one of the first to actually say, actually, we need to understand some of the human factors behind who's engaging with social bots and fake accounts. And to that end, there are two groups that are looking at that: the Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace Initiative out of the US and the Insider Threat Project out of Oxford University. So we set about looking at social bots to find people who will talk with anyone about anything, essentially. So our methodology, we used the winning bot code from the social bots competition at Aerofade's bot, and we did that with some minor modifications, which I'll talk about. But essentially it was the same. It was under MIT license. We had 610 participants. We got their Twitter information, their personality information, and their clout score, and then a linguistic analysis of their tweets. We divided them into two groups of 305 each and assigned them each a bot. We did that just so that we could get the whole job done with quicker. That was all. We gave our bot an image of an old lady with a bio along the lines of, I've got my own teeth, whereas the Aerofade bot had like a young dude in New Zealand. So we switched some sort of things around. How the bot works is that it'd take like a Flickr group, in our case dog fashion, but in his case kitten fashion, post it to WordPress and then tweet. So you'd get a picture like that, put it into WordPress like that, and then you'd get a tweet out there saying something like new blog post. So this is creating some content for the bot. Then next we used a service called If This Then That, which actually then took, let's see, if the weather went above 20 degrees C in a place where this old lady supposed to live, then she'd post a tweet. And that'd look something like this. Wonderful, I can switch the heating off now. It's 21 degrees C and sunny in Bournemouth. So this is creating some content at least. Then we got our target users, 305, and began following them. If any followed back, then we log them in an interaction CSV file. That's how technical it got. No databases, just CSV. Yeah, let's hear it for CSV files, eh? Well, yeah, exactly. Then we started tweeting. We started tweeting some random shit, basically. And this was not what we tweeted, but what This is what Aerofade's bot tweeted, but we felt that hose may be interpreted as slightly misogynistic, so we swapped our tweets where we felt that we might get into a little bit of difficulty and had stuff like this instead. And then, like this as well. So these were obvious cues that our bot might not be the person she's pretending to actually be. And here, we swapped any references to cats to dogs. That's essentially all we did. So you might think, yes, that's banal, and yes, it is, because we wanted to keep it as close as possible to the Web Ecology project. So we only switched dog for cats and removed anything that might be construed as slightly misogynistic. So all of the responses to that were, as I say, sort of logged in an interactions file. And then once we'd targeted all of the users, i.e. followed them all, then we started asking them questions to see if we could generate a response. This was how Aerofade's bot actually worked. So we had questions along the line of, ever milked a cow? What's better, a dog or a cat? And then we'd look at trying to get some responses to that, or maintain a conversation if a conversation actually occurred. So Aerofade's blog would just respond randomly from a pool of tweets, where our bot actually used an ELIZA engine. So you get something like this, hello, and it'd say, hey, how's your day going so far? But what I liked about Aerofade's bot is that it'd actually be pretty funny sometimes, so we wanted to maintain that and embed some of the random tweets in here. So it was a bit of a flip of the coin as to what you'd get. So you could get, for I think it'd say interesting, or lol, that's what she said. So it could go kind of random, but we also had to consider the problem of ethics. So we'd put some buffering in there so we could actually look at what our bot was going to tweet out before she tweeted it out. And this is why. This is Aerofade's bot, James M. Titus. Do you have any pets, and if so, what? Your Avi is adorable. Your kitty? No, I don't currently have any pets since my kitty passed away a few years ago. To which Aerofade's bot responded, lol, that rules. So props to Aerofade for making me cry with laughter reading that blog post. So we got a ton of limitations which you're all thinking about, and you're right. We used basic measures of personality, which you can read about. We had a pretty basic and dumb social bot. Each user got a different question, so maybe the questions had an impact of whether people responded. As the experiment progressed, more people followed the bots and arguably gave it more credibility, and we had no user follow-up to see if the people knew it was a social bot and were just playing along. So, but either way, people interacted, and it's pretty much identical to the Web Ecology project, which has already got some research on it as well, although we looked at the dimension of personality. So what did we find? Well, we got 20% return or response rate, whereas the Aerofade bot had got 40%, and that could be for a number of reasons. We targeted a diverse range of people, and they targeted people who were liking cats. We also had an old lady, they had a dude from New Zealand, and so